It's been a while since I've talked about AI, and it's actually come a long way, which is really cool to see, but it's a little bit worrying when you start to think about, is my job at stake? Will web developers still have jobs in the future? And so on. So in this video, I want to talk about this whole idea of, will your job be replaced by AI? And then the bulk of the video, I actually want to spend talking about how you can use AI to make yourself more productive as a developer and to enjoy coding even more. I'm going to give tons of different examples of what you can do and can't do with AI and the different things it excels at, as well as some pitfalls you have to watch out for. Welcome back to Web Dev Simplified. My name is Kyle, and my job is to simplify the web for you so you can start building your dream project sooner. To get started, I'm going to be talking about whether or not AI will replace your job, and then I have a lot of different examples I want to go through of how you can use AI in good ways and bad ways to further your code development. Now, the first thing I want to mention is that AI is not going to take over your job as a web developer. I know there's a lot of fear out there that AI is going to be replacing you and writing a lot of code for you, but the real reality is that even if AI starts to account for 50% of all code written, we're just going to write twice as much code as we did before, so there'll still be the same amount, if not more, developers actually writing code. We just have more total code out there. And this is something that I think a lot of people don't realize. And if we look at the history of development of programming overall, you can see this trend happen over and over again with different technologies. For example, when computers were kind of first coming around and people started programming them, punch cards were the main way that you wrote programs. And this was a very slow and difficult process. So the amount of actual code that was being written was relatively small. We had a very small amount of code being written because it required this laborious task of going through, punching this card, sending it through the machine. If it was broken, you now had to punch a brand new card to fix it and punch it through the machine and so on. So it's a very slow, laborious process. Eventually, along comes assembly that you can start programming your computers in an actual language. This language is not very easy to use. Trust me, I've written assembly before and it sucks, but it's something that's there that allows you to actually interface with the computer in a little bit easier way than punch cards. So immediately, a lot of people at that time maybe thought, oh, assembly, it's going to completely replace us as programmers. All of us punch card developers are going to go away and be useless. But as a punch card developer, your skill is not your ability to punch holes in a card and scan it through a machine. Your ability is to use your brain to solve difficult problems using a computer. And that skill translates over just fine when it comes to using assembly for your actual writing of code. So the amount of code that was being written actually increased drastically. So now we have a lot more code being written because it's much easier to write this code. So not only do we have more developers coming in writing the code, but individual developers are now able to write more code than ever before. And it's not like there's a hard cap where it's like, oh, you know what? The world can only have this much code. So as soon as we go beyond it, it's over. Every single time we have a new evolution of how we can write code that's quicker and faster than before, we just end up with more code being written. The same thing happened when a language like C came along, where C made it so you could write assembly code much easier because now you can write it in this unified language C that works across multiple different machines. And now you can see again, boom, we had a massive increase in the amount of code being written, but we also had the developers themselves being more competent and able to write more code. So we had the same amount of developers able to write more code, and the world just decided, you know what, we're going to create more code because we have more difficult and more amazing problems we want to solve. If you think about technology, it doesn't stagnate. We constantly want more complex, bleeding edge stuff inside of our technology. And this happens with every single new trend, every single new language or something that comes out that helps programmers. It increases not only the amount of code that these programmers are writing, but overall the amount of code that is being written across everything. The amount of applications being written, the amount of lines of code, everything increases because the barrier to entry is much lower than it was before. This is the exact same thing that's happening with AI. AI is coming along and it's saying, hey, you know what? I'm making it easier for you to write code. You can now use autocomplete to write code faster, or you can even have AI write code entirely for you. And non-technical people are able to write code that they weren't able to write before because these AI tools are able to help them write rather simple programs. So the amount of code being written is astronomically larger than it was before. We can just say we have this huge increase in the amount of code that's being written now because we have AI tools that not only allow you as a developer to write code faster than before, but it allows people that no longer were able to write code before to be able to write code now. It's the same thing in the punch card days. Being a punch card developer was difficult, and then the introduction of assembly made it easier. And going from assembly to C, even easier. And then we have languages like JavaScript that are even easier to write than C. And now finally we have an AI where you can kind of have almost an English level entry where you just type in what you want in English or even your native language and it'll output code for you. So yes, the introduction of AI will most likely lead to large portions of code being written by AI, whether it's through autocomplete or through developers or even non-developers writing out code using AI. But it doesn't mean that we have this hard cap on code. It's not like right now where we're hard capped on the amount of code that we can write in the world. This cap doesn't exist. Or if it does exist, it's so far up here that we can't even imagine. We're not even close to the amount of code that the world could possibly write. So every time we have a tool or technology that allows us to write more code, it doesn't matter because we're nowhere near this approach of a maximum, if it even does exist, because technologies and companies, they always want to have more and more code and the latest and the greatest. So all this ability to write code faster and better is doing is making it so that you as a developer are more productive in either your own projects or the projects you're working on for the company you're working at. Another example that I think is important to understand is that your job is not at fear of being replaced by these tools, because these tools are not meant to replace you. They are meant to write smaller scale applications, or maybe, just pieces of an application, or they're meant to assist technical developers in creating applications. It's the same thing with when Squarespace and Wix came around, and even WordPress to a degree. These made it so it's much easier for you to create a website, whether it's a blog or something for your business. It's just much easier to create these websites. And this allowed non-technical people to create relatively good looking websites for their business or for their, blog on their own. So people that was their sole job to just create blogs or really small business websites, yes, your job may be at jeopardy because now Squarespace and Wix are taking over that space. But your skills as a developer transfer just fine to other things, maybe more complex projects, working on larger scale projects for bigger companies. All these things need custom code. And even people that have Wix and Squarespace sites need custom code for those sites as well. And obviously there's developers that work on Wix and Squarespace, so there's a lot of developer need. It's the same thing with AI. People are going to write applications using AI. So if all you did as a job was write really simple applications that AI can write entirely on its own, then yes, maybe your current job is at jeopardy. But you can just move your job to something else, whether it's writing more complex software, working with AI to write bigger software, working at larger scale companies that need more custom things. So really all it is possibly shifting where you're at. But I can imagine most developers, if you're working inside of a company as a full-time developer, you're already doing code that is more complex than what an AI can do entirely on its own. Honestly, this fear of AI replacing you is something that you really need to just not worry about, because for the most part, AI is either for writing rather simple things, which that's okay, you weren't working on that anyway, or it's most importantly, a tool to help experienced developers write even better code at a quicker pace. So really all AI is doing is helping you to do the thing that you enjoy, which is creating software in the first place. So now I want to kind of spend the rest of this video talking about the different ways that you can use AI in good ways and ways that you may want to avoid using AI, so I can really help you become even more productive, because having skills as a developer that can work with AI is going to be really important going forward for landing a job as AI becomes more and more prevalent. Now, the first thing that I want to talk about is going to be how you can use AI to fix bugs inside of your code. And I'm going to be using ChatGPT for these examples because these are real world problems that I have run into that I've used ChatGPT for, and it's entirely free, so it's something that you can use on your own. All of these were done using the free version of ChatGPT. So you can kind of see, even with the worst case scenario of AI that you have available, you can still do some really powerful stuff. So this particular chat was from a problem that I was having where I had some software that I had written using FFmpeg to compress video files for my courses to make them easier for people to download without having to download these massively large files. And I noticed when I tried to use this software on videos I had recorded in the past, they came out with this massive green tinge. I can show you what I'm talking about. This is exactly what my videos looked like when I rendered them through my compression software. Obviously not what I want to have happen. It didn't do this with new videos, it only did it with these older files. This is something that's very hard to debug by using Google to try to figure out what the answer is, because I can't just say, hey, my videos that are older than X date have a green tinge to them while the new videos don't. I'm not going to get any result. So I just typed it directly into ChatGPT. I told them exactly what was my problem in detail. I specifically told them like the file formats. I specifically told them which files were working, which ones weren't. And I gave them the exact FFmpeg command that I was running so they could kind of get an idea of exactly what the problems were. And it allowed me to figure out what's going on with this problem. It told me all the different possible causes of this issue, and it gave me some different solutions. And specifically, I read through all of this, and instead of just like, not reading it and just saying copy paste this code and see if it works, copy paste this, see if it works, I specifically read through this so I could understand what it's telling me. And I can see, okay, it's probably based on like color space or some pixel stuff, or maybe even related to my GPU not working properly for this. And the most important thing I noticed from this is this third step right here. It said, hey, you know what? You can actually check all these different configurations and inputs of the files by just running this simple command. So that's what I did. I'm like, okay, you know what? I'm going to try to compare these two different outputs. And I ran the command, and it gives you a massive dump of information. So I said, you know what? This is another great thing for AI to do. I just said, hey, I ran this for both my output and my input, and here's the exact result. And you can see it just dumps a ton of information. So I gave it the first file, and then I gave it down here the second file for exactly what's being dumped from this. And I said, hey, what are the differences between these two? And it gave me an exact line by line of every single difference between them. And I noticed that, again, we had this stuff around color information showing up as the big difference. And it even said right here, this is probably what's causing your particular issue. And then down below, it gave me some potential fixes. And again, instead of just going copy, paste, copy, paste, copy, paste until I get something that works, I read through this to try to understand what's going on. And specifically, the problem was that it wasn't listing specific information around the color space for how it can convert things. So I thought, okay, it's definitely probably related to the color space. And you can see that these different functions all relate to the format of the color space. So I went around and I tried out these different functions and I went, oh, great, this is actually working. Now what I want to do is figure out why it's working. So I said, okay, you know what? What happens if I remove this color matrix section or this full range section or this format section? Is it going to work or not? And I was able to figure out, this color matrix, I actually didn't need at all. And I was able to use just this format right here. So I was able to leverage AI to do the difficult part of trying to find the solution to a problem that is hard to figure out just by Googling. And I was able to let it go through and parse this massive list of information, which is just time consuming for me to do. I used AI for that stuff, the really difficult time consuming stuff that I don't really need the skills to have because I don't have the knowledge of the deep intricacies of how FFmpeg works and how all this video compression works, but this AI is able to do that relatively well for me. But when it came to the more difficult part of actually implementing and writing the code, I used their starting code as an example, but I made sure to modify this code to exactly what I want. My end code doesn't look like any of these examples. It's different. It includes different changes to it to make it work exactly in my exact work case. And that's the big thing I think a lot of people don't realize with AI, is it's going to give you some level of code that you can use, but oftentimes making tweaks to that code is what you need to understand how to do. You need to understand how to look at that code, understand what's going on, and then change different aspects of that code to make it work in your specific situation. Another example I want to look at was something again related to my courses is I originally had all of my transcript files using SRT format, and now I need to convert them to the VTT format because of the way that the video profile uploader that I use works. It only accepts VTT files, not SRT files anymore. And I had some old SRT files I needed to convert over. So I kind of went through and I said, hey, you know what? I have an SRT file with this type of format. I gave it the first couple lines and I said, can you write me a JavaScript file that converts that to VTT? And it gave me a particular file that did that. And if I go back to the first rendition, you can see here is what it outputs for me. You can see it's hard-coded inputs and outputs and so on. And I tested it and it worked fine. So I was like, great, this works. The next thing I was like, hey, can you do the same thing but make it work inside of folders as well? So now you can see it's processing and looping through all my folders recursively. So I'm just able to iterate on what I want this code to do. And again, I tested this code and it worked exactly like I wanted to. So I was like, great, that's perfect. And then essentially I'd made a few more modifications to the code until I ended up with this final result right here. And this actual final result was not 100% correct. There were certain bugs inside of this code, but I was able to solve those bugs on my own because I had a relatively good understanding of how code and programming works. For example, this directory name right here, I actually wanted this to be the process.cwd, which is the current working directory. And it didn't give me that right away. I could have probably formatted my actual prompt to it a little better to make it clued in on what I wanted. But with my knowledge of programming, I knew, hey, I just needed to replace this one particular thing with the current working directory to make it work. Also, the way that it was doing certain things with converting over my file, it was leaving something that only had bugs in certain ones of my files. So I was able to go through and be like, oh, you know what? It's this particular line that some of my files have and some of them don't. It's not able to process that correctly. So I just modified the code slightly to be able to make that particular fix. So again, when you're working with AI, this is almost like that vibe coding way of doing thing that's kind of a popular thing to talk about, where you're just essentially telling it what you want it to do and it's making the changes for you. But again, still understanding what the code is doing is really important. You can't just vibe code your way through everything where you just tell the AI, do whatever you want, do it, and then just copy paste what you get at the end and hope it's going to work. Odds are there's going to be mistakes in that code or things you need to change to make it work in your particular use case. AI, though, is really great at writing these small little helper functions. For example, writing the code to convert from SRT to VTT is not hard code. I could have wrote this myself in not even that long. But doing that is time consuming and annoying and boring. I don't want to do that. So having an AI where I can just type in and have it do it. I mean, this AI chat took me just a few minutes compared to what would take me to actually write this out myself, which would maybe take 30 minutes to write it on my own. I saved a lot of time and it's a lot of boring code to write. So this is really great for these small little kind of helper functions where like, hey, I just need to do something. This is only for me. I'm never going to publish this for anyone else. It's just like a one-off kind of thing. AI is perfect at those particular situations. Now, the next situation that AI can be useful in is verifying information. And this is one that you have to be careful on because you can't just blindly trust what AI tells you. But one thing that I was running into, I was recently writing an extension for my course platform. I can actually see the extension right here. And the extension is going to be doing things to make working with my course a little bit easier because there's certain things that I wish the platform I use did, but they don't. So I was like, I'll just write a Chrome extension to do that particular thing. I'm still working on it, but I've got it mostly to what I want. And one of the problems I was running into is the video hosting was hosted inside of an iframe. So I needed to inject code specifically into that iframe using my Chrome extension. And I wanted to only match the iframes on certain pages. So I didn't want to inject into every iframe. I only wanted to match iframes on my course pages. So I looked through the Chrome documentation. I couldn't really find anything on this particular problem. So I just went, okay, you know what? I can't find the solution to this. I searched a lot of documentation. I searched a lot of Google. I'm going to go to the AI and I specifically asked them, hey, is there a way to only match iframes on certain pages with a Chrome extension? And I read through what they told me. And unfortunately, this is actually not something that you can do, or it's not something that you can do easily if it is something that you can do. And the code that they gave me doesn't actually do what I asked for. If I just blindly looked at this code, I'd be like, oh, great, this is exactly what I want. Because it's like telling me, hey, this is exactly what you want to do. And it's going to do this for you. And a lot of people, when they ask AI, they see all this information being returned. They're like, I don't have time to read this. I'm just going to go here, click copy, paste that where I want it to be, and I'm done. But again, this is not actually solving my particular problem. So it's really important that you understand when you're asking AI about things like, hey, does this work? Is this going to happen? What does this do? It's really important that you not only fact check to make sure that it's correct, but also understand every single thing that it's telling you. And one thing I noticed with ChatGPT in particular is it has a really bad confirmation bias. Essentially, if you tell it, hey, you are wrong, or if you tell it, I think this is correct, it'll almost always either say, yes, you're right, I am wrong, or it'll say, yes, you are correct, even if you're not correct and if it's not wrong. Obviously, it won't always do that, but I find that ChatGPT, a lot of AI in particular have this, but ChatGPT in particular, I really notice this with, if you tell it, hey, you are wrong, or hey, do this particular thing, I think it's true, it'll almost always lead towards confirming whatever you have already told it. This is why whenever I'm asking AI questions about things that I want to learn, I specifically try to leave any confirmation bias of what I believe out of that question. And I also make sure when I look through this, I confirm with the documentation or other, videos or sources on if this is true or not, because I know that AI is going to get things wrong more often than you actually think it is. So I went through this code and I went, okay, you know what? I know based on the documentation I've already looked at that this is not the particular thing that I want. So I realized that this particular problem that I was trying to solve is either not possible to solve or it's not worth the effort to solve it. Now, kind of the final example of me using ChatGPT for code related stuff is right here. This is a much longer chat conversation, as you can see that I had. And this is an older version of ChatGPT that doesn't have all the code in its own fancy little editor. This is from quite a while ago, actually. And this was me going ahead and saying, you know what, I want to create a compressor for my video files. The same thing I was running into problems with this particular section. This was me creating that actual compressor. And I went through a lot of different steps. So essentially, I gave it exactly what I said. I told it all the details of everything, and it gave me back some code. And I was like, great, this is the code that I want. I also specifically, this is an important thing a lot of people don't do, I specifically said, explain what each part of the script does. And that was because I don't understand all of the intricacies of every single option of FFmpeg. So I asked it, give me an explanation of what each of these tags that you're putting inside of FFmpeg does, so that way I can understand each of these flags, so that way I know, okay, this is something I want or this is something I don't want. That's really important when you're having AI write code for you, especially when it's something you're not super familiar with. Ask it to explain what each different part of that thing is doing, because then you can say, oh, you know what? It's doing this thing because it thinks I want that, but actually I don't want that. And then you can go through and iterate. This is kind of like that vibe coding thing. You know what? I was like, oh, you know what? I noticed you're modifying my audio. I don't want you to modify the audio, and so on. I have a lot of different things that I was essentially going through and just saying, hey, you know what? Change this, change this, change this, until finally at the very end, I was asking it specific questions about different things. For example, how do I limit the audio size for particular things? And it told me, hey, here's the actual flags for that. Obviously, I could have found this in the FFmpeg documentation, but I find that that documentation is quite difficult to read, and it's not the most fun thing to read. So using the AI, I was able to be like, okay, this is the flag. I was able to test it, and if it didn't work or maybe I wasn't sure on it, then I could go to the FFmpeg documentation for this exact section. So it's really a way for me to be able to streamline my research. I can say, okay, give me some code that does what I want and explain it. Then I can look at the code, and any parts that I'm confused on or aren't working like I expect, I can then go to the documentation for just that section of the code that I need to understand. So I really like AI in these particular scenarios where you want to write some code in a technology or tool you're not super familiar with, and it's going to give you that code and it can explain it to you. One thing again to watch out for though is that it can often be wrong. These explanations right here may not 100% be accurate or correct. So I think it's always important to be able to reference documentation for anything that isn't working as you expect or seems kind of strange. Also, if you're trying to learn something brand new for the very first time, I actually think AI is not super great at learning things brand new for the very first time. It's really great for additionally on top of your learning, if you're like, hey, I'm learning X, Y, and Z, and I'm a little confused about how this one thing works, it can explain it to you. For example, if you're learning CSS and you're confused about how box sizing works, you can say, hey, can you explain box sizing to me? And it'll do a great job of explaining that for you. But if you just say, hey, teach me CSS, it's not going to be able to do that super well for you because it's going to leave things out, it may get things wrong, and the information could be out of date. So I find when I'm trying to learn things, I almost always lean towards different videos and courses and articles, as well as once I kind of get an overall view from that on how things work, then I go towards documentation. And then if I still have further questions that can't be answered, I may go to AI to be like, hey, inside my code, I'm doing this thing. In the documentation, it says it should do this, but it's working differently for me. Maybe explain how this works in a little bit more depth for me. Now, kind of the final type of AI that I want to talk about is going to be like AI autocomplete, whether it's using just inline autocomplete or you're using like an AI agent. I think both of these are great tools. I personally use AI autocomplete in all of the code that I write outside of my tutorial videos. I generally don't use it in my tutorial videos because I don't want the AI to be writing the code for me. I want to be able to write it for you and explain exactly what's going on. But when I'm writing code on my own, I almost always have some type of AI autocomplete helping me out. And it doesn't matter what kind of AI autocomplete you use. They're all rather similar. So just use whichever one you find works the best for your use case. And then if you want to use like AI agents to make more sweeping changes across your code base, again, that's something that you can do just fine. But again, if you're going to be doing that, make sure that you kind of follow the different steps that I talked about in this video about how you can prompt it properly, how you can make sure it explains things to me. Because if you just go with the approach of vibe coding that a lot of people like to use these days, where you just tell the AI what to do and just accept, you're going to end up with code at the end that may do what you want for the most part, but it's probably going to have some bugs inside of it. You're not going to understand how the code works. So if it does have bugs, you're not going to know how to fix them. And overall, the amount of time you spend debugging the AI to fix your code is probably going to be longer than if you just made sure you understand how the code works along the way and debug the problems as they approach themselves inside the code. I found anytime I try to get AI to write code entirely on its own with no additional changes on my part, I find it almost always does a rather terrible job. And that's pretty much my take on AI. I think it's a great tool that can make your development and your learning quite a bit quicker and more enjoyable, but it's definitely not going to replace your job. And if you want to learn more about my thoughts on AI, I'll link some of my other AI related videos right over here. And with that said, thank you very much for watching and have a good day.